just started. So good afternoon, everybody. Welcome to it's the first in a very long time. So I don't know if you knew, I recorded quite a lot of webinars and podcasts in the past, and I've had a bit of a break, and then some people suggested that we get back into it again. So this sequence, this is going to be called exalens. So you probably know I work for a business called EXA. I run a project called EXA Foundation, and this is a Teach Computing webinar. The plan is that it's going to last for about 1 hour, and it's going to have 3 separate segments in it. One of them is on technical vocabulary, the second one is on flipped learning, and the third one is about revision strategies. Somebody's asked a question. There's a piece of software that I'm using called GCSE. It's costing me about £31 or something a month. I'm happy to pay the costs, provided people think it's good value. What will happen is, in about an hour's time, I'll press stop on the recording button, and then all of this will be recorded as a video. I'll share it on my YouTube channel, so you can come back and watch the video if you want, and the notes you can refer back to. Please, if you can, tell other people, even if they can't watch the live one, they can always come back and watch the catch up afterwards. So a couple of other things to mention. There should be, you should be able to really view 3 things, but it all depends on what device that you're on. You should be able to view the notes document, which I'm now highlighting all my text, so it appears blue on your screen. So really, that's the key thing you need to see. This video, this smiling character with the flowery shirt and the headphones plugged in, this is not absolutely essential. Just some people have said in the past that they like to be able to see it, so they get a flavor or a feel for what's going on, so it's not a disembodied voice. And then what I would say is the sort of second most important thing for me is a way for you to interact with me, which is the chat. So I'm now looking at the chat window, and I can see so far, because I have to scroll back up now to the top. At the top of the chat window, there's a welcome message for me, and then we've had messages from Penny and Chris and Steve and Charlotte and Amanda and Mike. They've all typed in a few messages in there. It would be really nice for me to know from time to time that the chat is actually working, that you can hear my audio. I can't see any reason why that we will have problems with the audio or the video or anything. But if things crop up, I will take heed of your question, and I will try to answer it in as best as I can. Sometimes you may ask me questions that it's going to be easier for me to email you afterwards. You will hear some background noise. I'm in an office. I don't know if you know the EXA Networks, who I work for. They're an internet service provider. Some of you may be in a school who are customers of EXA. I don't know, there's about 5,000 schools around the UK, primary and secondary schools. And the bit of the office that you can see behind me, that's the part that they deal with sales. There's another part of the office that you can't see at the moment, and maybe later on I'll do this when I don't rely on it. I'll lift the webcam up, and there's a whole technical section going on over there. There's a support section, and there's a team of software developers over there in the corner, but they're kind of quite shy. Whereas the salespeople, they're a little bit more, oh, you're going to see some of them walking this way now in just a moment. Now, all this kind of chatter and preamble is just to give you a little bit of an idea where I am. Oh, it's in Bradford in West Yorkshire, which is nowhere near where I live. Now, I'm now going to refer to the document over here. So I'm using Google Docs. This is a document which you should all be able to see in a few different ways. So you'll be able to see it within the recording, within the webinar, and you can also, if you've got a web browser open, you can swap between the tabs. So you've got a lot more control about what you can do. And sometimes I will highlight things within the webinar just to direct your attention to it. So you can see that today, Thursday, the 3rd of May, this is the plan. This is going to be one of, I don't know, maybe we might even make it to 100 of these. If you want later on, if you want to be able to get in touch with me via, say, email or whatever, there's a document there, which I'm just going to click on now, just so you can see. The screen might go blank for a moment. And then within this, you can see, you can contact me on Twitter. And so there may be one or two people now who've come here through Twitter. I have a Facebook page that you can contact me. Here's my email address. It's alan@exa.foundation. Sometimes people ask me what goes at the end. There isn't anything at the end, it's just .foundation, because the work that I do with EXA, it's all not for profit, meant to support teaching of computing in schools, and that's why we've gone for exa.foundation. So, hello, Thomas. Thomas, I don't know if you can hear me. We can hear you as well. So just reminding you, Thomas is, yeah, it's okay, that's fine. So anyway, so back to the main document, and I'm now going to move on to this section. I've done really the welcome. If you have any more questions or things that you, okay, yes, if you have any questions or interesting things, yes, Mike, thank you. I'll let you know when I need one of those. I'm going to move on to technical vocabulary. So one thing I can do is I've got a link now in the document that will take me through to this part. So I have some questions, and I'm going to post this one into the chat. So I'm just going to copy from the document, paste it in here. And my question really is, how much of a big thing do you make using the correct vocabulary in your classroom? So please just reflect on that. Think for a moment, and you might type something into the chat, please. So technical vocabulary, we're teaching computing or computer science, using the correct terminology and words. How important is it for you? Like, is it really important? It's something that you maybe think you should do more about, or it's not really something I've thought about too much until now. This is a little bit of a clue when you see me lift this object that I'm going to pause for a moment. So give you some time to think and reflect. So I'm waving at some of the people who are saying hello in the chat, some friends through different events that we've done around the country. So my question was just a moment ago, using the correct vocabulary in your classroom, how important do you see that it is? Now, I'm going to give some more people time to reflect on this, because I do really want these webinars to be as interactive as possible, but obviously clearly you're limited to being able to chat in the window. If you're on your iPad or your phone watching this, it's going to be more difficult for you to contribute. So I don't know if you've met me before or if you've heard me tell this story, that for me, the transition to teaching computing from teaching ICT and DT, I think it took me 3, 4, 5 years or more. And at first, I hadn't really latched onto the idea that I was going to have to inherit and use this whole new vocabulary when I was teaching computing. And being completely honest, at first I used a lot of the wrong vocabulary. I would say stuff sometimes and things and thingamabob when I didn't actually know the correct word. And sometimes children would call me out on certain technical terms. And it was a bit embarrassing at first. So I decided to try and own this and identify this as a particular thing I was going to have to excel or develop within. And I also have noticed I made some friends during my transition with people who were software developers, people who are using these tools every day. I also made friends with people who are academics that are like teaching computer science in a university. So I have a good friend called Martin Bateman in Preston. He has a PhD in computer science, and a lot of the time I'd ask him to listen to the things I was saying or doing, and he'd sometimes come in and correct me and say, "Oh, you kept calling that thing that thing. Well, actually, you're better off calling it this." And I found that really useful to have a friend who knew a lot more than I did, and I could sometimes check and reference my language with them. So, for example, I would say sometimes, I can't remember the exact question now, but it would go something along the lines of, "Oh, Martin, when I'm using Python, now I would call that, like I'm calling it a scripting language, and it's not really compiled. Is that okay?" And sometimes Martin would do this. Ooh, now let me see. Alan, are you asking like in terms of your GCSE classes? And I'd say, yeah. He said, well, actually, a lot of the language in terms of GCSE, now you can say that, but if we're talking about people at undergraduate level or master's level, then no, those languages aren't strictly true, those definitions. So, not to dwell on it too much, but I'm now going to try a couple of questions with you. So I have a character which you might be able to see right now on your screen, and I'm going to post this character into the chat window as well. And my question is, this character here, do you have a name for this character that you use in your classroom? You know, if you see a child using it, if you're using it yourself, it might be that you're doing some programming and you used a particular character. And straight away, I've seen a couple of answers coming along. And so this, if you've ever been on one of the Extra Foundation events that I do, you might have heard me make a big song and dance about this. I'll pause. Um, don't worry too much about what you type into the chat because I have actually asked some people beforehand if they'd try and be a little bit less intellectual in the chat because it's a bit more entertaining to read some of the things that people type in without having to be too honest. And you know, I could say what happens in the chat stays in the chat, but I have warned you already that this is being video recorded and it will go on YouTube later on, but it'll be semi-private. We're not going to have thousands of people watching this, but I would expect maybe 100 people will end up watching this video by the end. So um, I have always I've always called this character the hash character. Um, it does have other names, and I'm going to talk about some of the other names now. So, what used to grieve me quite a lot, and still now a little bit, is when I hear people refer to it as the hashtag. And I would say, well, okay, well, if I'm going on Twitter, I might use a hashtag. And for a moment, let's go back up to the top of this document because you will then see I've used that character in front of this here, exalens, teach computing. And for me, that's largely because I spend a lot of time inhabiting social media spaces where, yes, we do call it the hashtag. But if actually I'm going to use this character within a text-based programming context like Python, for example, well, I would not call that the hashtag because it's not a hashtag, it's a hash character, a hash comment. Um, and one of the things I did actually find it very difficult to get my students to stop calling it hashtag and calling it hash character. So one day we spent a little bit of time where I did a little bit of investigation myself, and I said, well, there is another name we can call it. We could call it the Octothorpe character, and you should have seen their faces. You can probably imagine yourself, Octothorpe? Why on earth is it called Octothorpe? Or you made this word up? And well, no, I haven't actually made this word up. What I could do is I could go to a search engine here. Let me drag my window down a little bit, and we could type in the word Octothorpe, thinking, what is this absolutely strange word I've never heard of? Oh, and there we have, look, within the dictionary, there is a character called Octothorpe. Did I spell it with an E? So we can see it with an E, we can see it without an E. And there is some kind of a story that you might go into somewhere that how apparently this caused not just a teacher lots of problems, but people who worked for a company called Bell Labs, which later on I think became Hewlett Packard. They also had the same problem. So they decided to invent a word, and I think they had a competition amongst their employees, and they started to call it the Octothorpe character. And it's kind of become official at some point. So if you don't want to call it the hash character, you might want to call it the Octothorpe instead. Now, I was listening to Octothorpe, and I was listening to a radio program the other night, one of my favorite ones on Radio 4, a bit of a Radio 4 nerd or a geek. And they were talking, the premise of the program was all about the words and language that we use. And the thing that the radio presenter did, and it was Michael Rosen, and he said, right, so let me just scroll a little bit just so you can see the thing I'm doing. And he said, right, what we'll do is we'll go to hashtag one first of all, and we could discuss that thing, and then we can go to hashtag number two. And I was doing the iron and stuff like, no, don't call them hashtags. They are hash characters. I don't know. Do you think I'm being a bit old-fashioned? Maybe I am. But I would have thought if students are calling a hashtag in an exam, I don't know. I would feel much happier if my students are calling it the hash character. Here's another one. Let's forget about that because you can see it's something I clearly spend too much time thinking about. And yes, in America, If you ring up a certain switchboard telephone service, it might say to you, press the pound key on the keyboard, which is something we call a hash. But I've highlighted something else here. Now, my question to you might be, what would you call this object here? If you saw this appear within a script or a program, you could see that. So somebody has suggested we might call it str, which I know within Python, that's how it's referred to as str. But perhaps within a GCSE computer science exam, it may not be sufficient to refer to it as str. And if it said something like, Michael is writing a program and Michael decides to have an element within here. So I would be expecting we would call that a string, which is a data type, which is often limited by these characters here. And we'll talk about these, or symbols, we'll talk about these symbols in a moment. It may be a character or a series of characters. It could be a null string. Let me show you what a null string would look like. There's a null string. There's no characters that we can visibly see in between them. So we could call that a string character. Now, here's another thing. So I'm talking about these symbols. Sorry, I need to correct myself. We call it a string data type. Now, here's something else I want to show you just in relation to that. So I would call this character here an apostrophe, waving at somebody who was a bit noisy before and he's now trying to be a little bit more quiet. So we have a character here. Now, I have one of these in my surname, and I'm accustomed to calling this character here an apostrophe, and I would call this character here speech marks. However, I have heard software developers, of whom I have some colleagues who are software developers, refer to this as single speech mark and double speech mark, and that doesn't rest so easy with me. I'm a bit uneasy when I hear them call them that, refer to them. I'm much more familiar and happy with these being called speech marks and apostrophes. And I think also if you speak to the colleagues who teach English in your school, you may hear them also call these apostrophes, speech marks. Occasionally, I'm not going to name the teacher who said this, but I've heard a teacher refer to these as gunshot wounds and bunny ears. I wouldn't ever really feel easy other than now calling these gunshot wounds and bunny ears. Perhaps we should just call them what they are. So I'm not telling you officially what to call them. I'm just suggesting that we call these apostrophes, these speech marks, or single and double. But here's an interesting thing. The reason why I don't like calling them double. Look at this. If I highlight this character, and now I highlight the character next to it. Can you see what they are? We have one character, two characters. So that is an apostrophe, that is an apostrophe. So I would perhaps call them double apostrophes or double marks or whatever. And I think that's for me where I prefer. This is one single character. Here we have two single characters. And I think that gets a bit confusing because look, we also have a single character there and then a single character there. And I know if we go back to this string here, and if we were using Python, there's a character I'm looking for on my keyboard. I'm not sure if I can find it or not. No, that's not the one. I was looking for one which basically means it's almost, oh, here it is, almost the same thing as, let me go edit that. So I'm not saying these objects here are the same, but they are often interpreted as being the same because they use here apostrophes, here speech marks to limit or identify this object as a string data type. Now, what I'm going to do is I want to just, I've realized I've got some photographs and other objects here that I can mention and refer to. And I was at a school the other day. So sometimes schools ask me to put on events for free in their school, and I'm always happy to do that. So if you're somewhere in a school somewhere else in the country and I've not been to your school, I know I've been to Penny's school because she invited me in. And I think I've been to some schools where Mike has come along. It's the same Mike I'm thinking of. You may have seen me do something like this in one of the events. So let me scroll down so you can see what this is. So what I will often do, and I do this in lots of different ways, I might have a flip chart, I might have a whiteboard. So on Tuesday I was at a school in Bath where I was able to write these things on the flip chart. Sometimes I bring a temporary flip chart, temporary flip charts or a temporary whiteboard. So you can buy these rolls of 30 sheets. It's kind of like cling film, thicker cling film that you can't see through. So it's white, it's opaque. And what you could do is you can roll a sheet off, stick it onto your whiteboard, right over the top, and then when you're finished, you just lift it off and stick it onto a wall or somewhere in your classroom. But it's not sticky, it uses like electrostatic to hold it in place. It's a little tool that I like using. I think it costs about £1 a sheet, and maybe after a year or so, if you're fed up with it, you can throw it away and it gets all crinkly and creased. Anyway, what I tend to do as we go along, I listen for students to use the correct vocabulary. So a moment ago, somebody mentioned a string. I go, oh, string, let's write that word on the board. Not to be confused with the word integer. And it's a data type. And one of the things I like to suggest that teachers might do is when you hear a great word being used, so somebody I'm talking, let me just have a look through. So Mike said STR before. Oh, Mike, you mentioned STR, but you really meant to say this other thing, didn't you? And then Mike might go, what's he on about? What's he on about? You know that thing that rhymes with the noise a bell makes, like ding, ah. And then Michael goes string, and I go, yeah, string was the word. Well done, Michael, for mentioning the word. So we're praising people for using the correct vocabulary. Not to be confused with an integer, of course, because here we have integers. Integers are also very, very useful, but and then can I see if I can just shift my, no, it's not going to be easy to do that, but I do have this list of vocabulary scrolls down. So I don't think that's too hard a thing for most teachers to do, to have like a temporary list. As you go through the list, you can rub things out, you can add things in. I do occasionally have another list. I say like, not that these words are banned, but these are words that we're trying to shift away from using. So text. So for example, if I've got a class who are not yet doing a lot of programming and say, oh, I've got some text and I want this text to appear, and say, can we not use the word text? Is there another word? Like, let's write the word text over on this list in red pen to say that it's not banned, but maybe we should try moving towards using string in the future. And then, so go on, carry on, Michael. You were telling me, yeah. So you got the, and you can see this is Michael now. Michael goes, yes. So the thing we do is we get the string and go, yay! Yeah, we're using the correct vocabulary. So just doing whatever you can to reinforce it. And what is very, very nice is later on when you're walking in the corridor, has happened at times, and I've heard children go, oh, yes, and our teacher was earlier showing us about pseudocode, and I go, oh, pseudocode, So I like to champion the correct use of the terms whenever they come up. Now, if you think I sound a bit barmy right now and you listen to me waving my arms about and getting excited, just imagine what all the other people in the office, there's about 50, 60 people in this office here in Bradford, and they must think I'm absolutely bonkers, but you know that I really am. So I'm just reading now some of the messages in the chat. 66s and 99s. Yeah. Now that is a problem. So you noticed before I was using a Google Doc, and sometimes I have noticed that if you type in a thing and you kind of go, it occasionally when you copy and paste things, it goes for printmakers quotes, which do have this kind of inverted look. And that's something to watch out for, especially if you're copying and pasting code from a thing that's online. Now, Charlotte, you made a really nice thing there. You said about you run a code club for home educated children, but because you've got a database background, you tend to use the technical vocabularies, and why would we not be? I mean, there's times when children are not correct, ready to be using those terms, and surely they should be hearing it from us and later on saying, "Ooh, hey, Charlotte." Pop in and out of this webinar as often as you do. You'll be able to catch up with the live broadcast later on. So, right, there's a couple of other things I just wanted to mention to you. So, I like to take photographs when I'm out on my travels visiting schools. So one of the things I like to do is I like to look at people's classroom displays. and I will often take photographs of them. And sometimes people ask me, how like this one here in the top right hand corner. People often say, "Whoa, that looks great. Where can we get that poster from?" And I don't know. That's not such an easy answer. But what I wanted to show you is here's one way that one teacher spent a lot of time thinking about the particular vocabulary that they want students to be using, like binary, Python algorithms. Now, I didn't ask, but it may have been that this was something that was done just half an hour before open night started, and it was done kind of pretty much in a rush. Here's some other sorts of things that I want to show you. So a teacher's, this was a school I visited down in Devon, Barnstaple, and the teacher invited me in there. You can see that they've got elements of the computer with arrows pointing to it, so you can physically see where they are. This teacher here, this teacher had found a particular website. I can't remember which website it is. You might have to post it into the chat. But you can get all these technical terms. You can just stick them on the board. It's useful sometimes to be able to go run over and point to a word, especially if you're trying to give somebody a clue. Here's something in particular I wanted to show you. Now, not all of you will have seen this. So you may have heard of barefoot computing, which is initially intended for students of primary school age to support them with computing in the classroom. And they have really lovely posters and things. I'm going to show you how you can get those in a moment. So we've got things like persevering, creating, collaborating, debugging, and these are all computational thinking. Oh, I inadvertently clicked on that photograph, but it's helpful. You can see. So so that's that one. Let me just go back a step. And sometimes you can see other examples. It's quite so you now have in that document, you have a link to some of these other teachers' classroom displays. Sometimes people ask me, have I seen any ideas and examples? And if you ever want to know, I can tell you some of the teachers. You go and visit and talk to those teachers yourself if you want to get some inspiration. There's a particular one I'm looking for. Of course, I'm not going to find it now, am I? Okay, right. And some of these are from visiting museums, right? So just to go back to the Google Doc, which has got links to these resources. Now, earlier, sometimes what happens is people say like, "Ooh, I don't have a friend like the one that you said, Alan. I don't have a friend who's a PhD doctor in computer science, so I don't really know who I can talk to." So there is a book that you can get from the British Computing Society. You can purchase it. I think it's about £25 or so. But sometimes people say, do you know what? It would be useful just to be able to have a look at the book. So here's a way you can look at the book. So this might save you some money. And if I scroll my window and resize my window like this, you'll see here's a cover of the book. So it's shared under the Google Books project, and there's about 266 pages in this book. All I'm going to do now is I'm going to very quickly scroll to a particular section within the book. Let's look at, there was one earlier. I mean, it's very, very technical, but it might just be useful for yourself. So system software and operating system. Now you could actually come up with an activity for your classes where you say, you give them in groups a particular term and the BCS definition, and you could say, right, what we need you to do is pick out 2 or 3 words that you think will help people point to operating system. I know some people at the moment are experimenting with Google Classroom and 365 Classroom and Teams. It could be that you could have some collaborative document where you could ask students within your groups to develop and define their own terms. Or maybe you don't have to use any of them. You could set up a wiki within your own classroom, and then we could have an analog version of the wiki where you just print out the headings, and you could have that running somewhere in a frieze around the side of your classroom. Now I'm looking at the time. The time is 5 o'clock, and I think I've possibly overrun a little bit on that section. And then now, and there's a link that, oh, there's another vocab guide there. So you probably know that people already share loads and loads of resources at the Computing at School resources page, and even just a very quick browse through there will help you find one. And I found one earlier today. Once you're signed in, you can download that document for free, and it might save you doing a little bit of work yourself. And the barefoot ones, I've got that open on my computer. I'm just going to pull it over into a tab. There is a poster there that you can download. You have to create yourself a free account, but once you've signed in, then you can download it yourself. And it's very, very nice. And they've got some other, and they've even got it in Welsh as well, if you decide, and that's okay. Now, what I'm planning to do in a moment is to move into the second stage of the webinar. But I'm going to allow just a minute or so in case some people want to go and refill their drink, or they need to run out for a moment, or they want to grab a piece of paper or something like that. Check what time it is, see if you've got a text message from husband or wife or somebody saying like, oh, you left the kettle on or something like that. So while we're waiting for people to have a short break, what I'd like to do is I'd like to mention some other things that you might be interested in. So I've told you that today I'm in Bradford, and I'm going to ask you that maybe you'd like to join me in Bradford one day. In fact, a specific day, Friday the 29th of June. So that's when we're going to be having our third annual Exabytes conference. So it's a teaching and learning with technology conference. There is a lot of computing content, but it's not specifically computing. So you might have some colleagues who teach using technology, and technology we class as things like whiteboards and pens and paper and iPads and microphones and cameras and all that sort of thing. Last year we had about 100 people came, and a large amount of those independently me said it was the best conference they've ever been to. It's a very, very comfortable hotel. There's lots of food and refreshments and offer, but you get to meet loads and loads of teachers. There's loads and loads of sessions to choose from. And some people complain that they don't often get to go and watch other people teach. Well, at this conference, you get to go and watch lots of other people. If you know that your school are already a customer of Exit, then it's just £10 to come along to the conference. If you'd like to come for free and you don't mind hosting a session for about 40 minutes or so, and it could be just on something, like it could be technical vocabulary, something you've tried yourself, you don't have to be an expert, then come along for free, and I could possibly even help you get to the hotel if you needed to stay the night before. I've been able to provide rooms for people in order. And if you want to find out a little bit more about it, just click on this link here, exa.foundation/events. And I'm going to switch that off. And you can see that already there is a page you can go to find out more details about it. So it's Friday, the 29th of June. And on your screen in a moment, you'll see some photographs from people who've been in previous years. You might even recognize some of them. And if you've been here yourself, you might even type in the chat, yay, I went last year, hoping to get there again. You don't have to, and I don't pay people to do that. So if you don't want to get free tickets and you don't want to get a £10 ticket, it's £49 plus VAT. And we have a teach meet the night before. You can already start to see some of the people who've signed up. We've only just started promoting it, really. We've got Sway coming up from Milton Keynes. We've got Nick coming up from London. We've got Catherine. So Catherine Elliott works in Sheffield. She's doing a lot of sessions on special educational needs and how technology can be used to support them. We've got Carl Simmons coming over from Edge Hill. And we've got Claire coming. She's just starting her first year in teaching. So yeah, you might think that this is a bit of an advert, and yes, it is. So there might be other things that you're interested in. In fact, there's another thing I'm going to mention here. So some people say they're just starting to think about teaching Python to year 7. So I've got a free scheme of work you can download. Just click on this link here. It takes you to the Computing at School website. You can download it. It's been very, very popular. You don't have to pay any money to download it. And there's about 6 or 7 lessons that you could teach there to your classes if you want. And the last thing I'm going to mention in this little segue is Hello World magazine. So here's a question to those people who are still with us and they haven't disappeared. Are you a subscriber of Hello World magazine? If you're not, don't answer. If you are, type a message into the chat. Do you subscribe to Hello World magazine? I think it's a fantastic magazine. It's completely free for teachers. You get a copy posted to you, and there's one coming out in about a week, and there'll be an article in it written by a certain teacher called Alan O'Donoghue, all about organizing school trips and stuff. The reason I mentioned it is because a lot of people don't realize that they're asking for anybody who teaches to write articles for Hello World 6. And if you've got a particular idea, I would highly and strongly recommend that you write an article for the magazine. If you've not yet subscribed, make sure that you do, and you can access all the previous content online. Now, I'm going to move to the second topic of tonight, and the third topic I'm probably going to be starting at about 20 past. I've got some GCSE exam papers that I've only been writing this week that I'm going to be sharing for free in about 10 minutes or so. So I'm going to move to the second section. I'm going to click on here where it says Flip Learning. That's going to take me to the next part of the webinar. Okay. Now, I spend, I think, a lot of time at conference sessions, running workshops, all about flip learning. And what do I want? I just want to put a page break in here so I go on to the next page. Right. So I really found it a struggle to start teaching GCSE computer science back in 2010, 2011, because the classes that I had, I mean, initially it wasn't too much of a problem, but then I had classes of 27 and 28 in number, and I would have one or two real boffins in the class who actually could have passed a GCSE without any support from me. And then I had one or two that had chosen it, and they really, it perhaps wasn't the best choice that they could have chosen. And I decided initially we had 2 lessons a week. So my plan to begin with was we would have one lesson where we do programming and one lesson where we do theory. Now, it sounded like a really good plan at the time. Here's my question to you, people who are still with me. So it says my webinar software tells me there's 10 people at the moment paying attention. Do you do that sort of thing? Do you have one lesson where you teach programming and then one lesson where you teach theory? And you could just say yes, or you could say, I tried it, but it doesn't quite work. So for me at the time, that seemed like the best idea to do. So what I started to realize was the programming lessons, they absolutely loved it. It didn't matter whether they were a programmer, a geek, a nerd, or a complete noob. They all seemed to really, really enjoy the programming lessons. But then when we came to the theory lessons, oh my gosh, it was just like murder. The boffins, I would never feel like I was going into enough depth, enough detail with them, the ones who actually had studied a lot of the content already. And then the students who really didn't enjoy the theory, they would be saying things to me like, sir, you know those lights above you? And I'm like, yeah? How is this related to computer science? Why is it that that one over there um, like is flashing and now it's not working anymore? Or what are those circles in the ceiling? And I knew at that point when they were asking me those kind of questions that they just weren't paying attention or they were finding it really, really tough. So we did things like we played games, we tried doing it unplugged, put post-it notes on our head, we tried to act out different parts of the CPU. And I can remember trying this, and sometimes one of them would put their hand up and say, "Sir, can we not just do it the way we do in other lessons, where you just basically have a PowerPoint, you just read the theory out?" And I tried that as well, and it was just absolutely horrible. So I tried lots and lots of different things, and in the end, to long story short, I started experimenting with a concept that I'd heard of called flipped learning. Now, the first time I'd heard about flipped learning, I really didn't think that it would flow. I couldn't see how it would work. But after a year or so, I wasn't doing it exactly in the way I'd read about flip learning. I was doing it in a different way, where I'd kind of taken a notion of flip learning, but I'd crafted it in a way that really suited me and my learners. Now, I'm not going to go into all of the detail now because I do one-day courses on this, and it does take a lot of time for people to get their head around it, especially when they've never really tried it themselves. I do have a video, and I'm not going to play the video now. It would be better for you to go and watch the video when you have time yourself. I'm just going to show you, you might have seen this video. I recorded it in the summer when yeah, I recorded this video in the summer when I just had an operation on my wrist, and like during the video, I'm trying to be careful not to show that. Um, but in a 3 minutes or so, I give like an overview, and I absolutely believe that this is the best way to teach the theory for GCSE computer science. When I started doing it myself, I started writing blog posts about this approach. Let me just skip forward to, let's see, this is a bit where it shows a little bit more. And when when I started writing about it, other teachers started asking me if they could have access to the quizzes and the content. And I found out spending a lot of time helping other teachers use it, but it was paying off because other teachers started telling me about how it was working great for them, and it kind of spurred me on just a little bit to carry on with that. But anyway, again, long story short, about 2 years ago, the curriculum changed. It was a new specification, and then some of these teachers were using it said, would I mind rewriting it and revising it? And I have done. So we currently have about 15,000 teachers and students using this latest version that I've developed, which I've called the GCSE Computer Science MOOC. And teachers say the very nicest things about it. Teachers say like, wow, it's just totally transformed the way that they teach. It means within their lessons, the teachers can teach exactly what they need to teach to the students, when they need to teach it, and only to the students who need it, rather than this one size fits all. Like, okay, today we're all going to learn about von Neumann architecture. No, instead, what you can do is you can pick out, you can identify groups within your classes that need those particular elements being taught. And I mean, for me, it took a huge amount of time to set it up when I was doing it with my classes, but it definitely felt worthwhile. I've actually saved you a huge amount of time because I've already set it up for you, so that you don't have to. And I mean, if you've not started using it yourself, if you'd like to know more about it, there's some slides you can have a look at yourself. Obviously, the slides without the voice is a little bit difficult for you to fully experience, but there is a trial version which is completely free to use. I would say there's about 12 weeks, 14 weeks of content there that even if you decided now with your year 10s or you've got year 9s, so you're transitioning up to GCSE in the next few weeks, give it a go. It's fully supported. There's videos for teachers. I've created a bit of a manual that explains how you can get started. Um, there's some teachers are picking out the little bits that they want to use to make it work for them. There's quizzes, there's exam papers, there's loads and loads and loads of content. If you decide, like some teachers have done, that after 7, 8 weeks, you really, really like it, you want to use the remaining part of it, there is a subscription of £100 per year. But the good news again, if your school is a customer of EXA networks, or EXA education, and a lot of schools are, but they don't realize they are because they get their internet through a third party, they get it completely free. Now, Penny's just mentioned a comment which I'll come on to in just a moment. There's something I was thinking of, yeah. There's the trial. It's completely free. There's no time limit. You can use it as much as you want, whenever you want. And like I don't broadcast this too much, but here I go. There are one or two schools who, for one reason or another, have kind of written a very emotional appeal and explained their situation, and we've found ways of making it available to them where we've put the subscription on hold or something. So I don't want anybody to be saying that they can't afford the £100 and therefore they can't afford to use it if they genuinely want to use it. So it's free. Give it a go. Give it a trial, and I'll do everything I can to try and support that use of that. Now, some teachers have said now, Well, because the NEA is not the, it's changed the programming project. It's not the same required element that it used to be. Um, and I've spent a lot of time thinking about this, but actually my lessons would still carry on the way that they were because ultimately the vast majority of students that I've taught really, really enjoy the engaging, hands-on problem solving. Now, Penny, if it's the Penny I'm thinking of, you invited me to come down to Benfleet. Oh no, it was Hannah who invited me down to Appleton School, and you came along, and we took part in a hands-on session pair programming, which was not exactly the same as what I do with my classes. But if you remember, you kind of felt a little bit like, oh, you were working with somebody, your partner. Um, I would say 60, 70% of my lessons were that sort of thing. And if students need to know things about technical vocabulary and data types and operands and operators, I would be teaching them with my classes through pair programming challenges. And they loved the pair programming so much that I could actually use it as a reward system so that when students were not complying and filling, doing what they should have been doing about, in terms of the flip learning element, I would just take that away from them. And they were, I didn't have many students in tears begging me to get on with the pair programming, but it was a massive motivator. The fact that if they were 2 or 3 tasks behind, or if they weren't making the relevant progress with their theoretical elements, they were just denied access to the programming activities, and they would shout and throw things around. And well, in that case, it was a school behavior issue, and there's other things, but it was just such a massive motivator, the fact that I would deny them access to the pair programming activity. So yeah, I don't want to go on about that too much because the plan is that this webinar is going to finish in 10 minutes. So there's lots of links to things there. You can post message chat now, and and if I don't answer them now, I will answer them later on. But I now want to move on to revision strategies. So this is a very, very topical at the moment revision strategy, because obviously if you have a year 11 class right now, then you're probably they're probably doing your not in, you're doing their not in, trying to find as many different imaginative ways as possible to support them. So you may have already heard me talk about this bit, which I'm going to point you to in a moment. So I've got a document here where I've got 75, that should say revision, not revisions, strategies. So I'm going to point to that in a moment and highlight and single out a few things that I think will be particularly beneficial. But also as a bonus for staying right through to the end of this webinar, I am now sharing with you 2 free exam papers that I was writing this week on Monday, Tuesday, on the train on the way down to Bath. And I'm going to spend 1 or 2 minutes looking at this, and then I'm going to refer to the bonus material that you can use. So if you've got a year 11 class tomorrow, you're probably going to be going, oh, Alan, this is brilliant. This is really going to help me because it's something I can do that I'm not going to have to sit up all night preparing. So I'm going to come on to those in just a moment. I think there's potentially a lot more help for you within this document. And I want to just give you a quick heads up about it. So I'm going to click on this link now, and my browser is going to take me to a blog post, which I think I initially wrote it about 2 years ago, and then I keep coming back every so often. Yeah, April the 30th. Gosh, exactly 2 years ago. It started off as 15 revision resources, then 30, 45, and now I've lost count, but there's possibly close to 100 things within it. I'm clearly not going to have time to go through all of them now. There's 1 or 2 that I've written a lot of detail about, and I probably need to come back and revise it again. So the school I was at teaching when I first started writing this, we had a whole school revision program, not just for year 11s, but year 10s, year 9s, year 8s, because the whole school were doing exams, including year 7. And there's even links. Look, there's a webinar back nearly over 3 years ago where I discuss and go into more detail on that. So you have to listen to me repeat content that's out there already. Let me scroll down. And then I discuss one that for me, this was what I tried loads of stuff, but the one that was a big hit with my classes was these bite-sized summaries. So I had a particular class that was, I don't mind saying now, there was the most awkward GCSE class I'd ever had when they were in year 11. And there was all sorts of history there about why they were an awkward class to change a teacher and all this kind of thing. But I hit on a particular strategy they absolutely love. And some teachers have read this post here, they've watched this video, and they've come back and they said that was a lifesaver for them. There's some photographs to resources that you can show them. I'm really hoping that I can give you as much content as possible without any cost, and you can find these and my own lesson notes you can go and have a look at. And then there was another one some teachers said has been more popular with them, Quiz Trade. Done this a lot of times. So you probably know I do lots of free CPD events for teachers up and down the country. Got a couple coming up this month. I've got one on Friday in Birmingham, just near the city centre. And I keep telling teachers, please invite me into your school. We'll put a free session on in the afternoon after school. Even some teachers asked me to do one on a Saturday morning in May. Um, so you'll see me do the quiz trade thing. And then this part of the document, I know I'm going through it quite quickly. This is where I've got Helen, good old Helen. Actually, she's not old, but good Helen in Preston. Helen's created loads of Quizlets that you could now be using tomorrow with your classes. They're from the Susan Robson book. Some of them are going to be legacy GCSE, but there's still about 80% of that content at least is relevant. David Batty, David has these wonderful ideas. You've probably seen already the Amazon Echo app that he's created. The students can use this themselves at home if they have an Amazon Echo. Has Quantum. There's loads. Not all of them are actual resources to click on. So Mark Clarkson, Mark's one of my heroes as far as teach computing, computer science goes. Mark talks about the VCOP approach, which gets the students to pause and reflect and consider vocabulary. Ooh, vocabulary, that reminds me of something. We were talking about that somewhere else earlier, weren't we? Connectives, and that was me trying to be funny. Sometimes people put in these messages in the chat where they can put in like a smiley face, or they can do a really not sure that's a funny at all, or they can go like a boo, Alan, something like that. But that's just so I know that it's still there. We've actually got 12 people watching right now. So there's loads and loads of little ideas, and I would suggest what you do if you're having one of those moments where you really, oh, I don't know what to do. Maybe there's just one thing in here that you could just decide you're going to try with your class the next lesson, and it just might be. I've been surprised because I've had things with my classes that I really did not expect that were going to work, and just because it was something different, sometimes it was one that they'd been doing with their geography class, and they just stuck to it. They took to it straight away because they really liked it. I'm not going to go through all of the lists. I'm just looking. I've only got a few minutes left before I stop the recording, but it goes on and on and on and on and further and further and further. Now, back to our Google document. So, a teacher called Gareth down in Bath, he invited me to come in down. He didn't just want me to do an after school, a before school. He wanted me to come down and do everything all in one day. He wanted me to do like a get teachers inspired, enthused, different ways to teach computing. So we did that in the morning. He then wanted me to do 2 lessons with his year 11 GCSE. He said he's got quite a bright set of year 11s, no pressure there. He wanted me to do some exam prep sessions. So I did those on Tuesday as well. And then another session looking at how we can get the children to be more resilient. And then we did this webinar, sorry, not webinar. We did a hack jam. 64 students came after school. I don't know if you've seen, I've tweeted some links to the videos that the school made. Anyway, back to the topic. So I've created these exam papers really to support students with paper 2. Now, putting you on the spot. Oh, let's get rid of that message. Just give me a moment to, there's a message here I need to close just so we can see this. Oh, there it is. Now, if I just tweak and move things around, here's some exam questions that you can try I'm putting you on the spot. So I've actually now shared completely free. You can use these some exam papers. But question one, the paper one I've created, I'm going to read out this question. I want you to have a bash. So question number one. This table describes three different concepts within computational thinking. Complete the names of the remaining two in the table below. And it gives an example. So we have here description. Solving problems in a logical step-by-step manner. This can be referred to as algorithmic thinking. When we simplify objects or patterns by removing unnecessary detail, what might we call that? And hopefully you're going, bing, 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 I know what that is. And you could type in your answer in the chat, as some people are doing. Yeah, come on, let's do that. And now we'll move on to the second part. So you can see there's 2 points for this question, 2 marks. The second part of question one. Now, if we break a problem, one big problem, down into smaller individual parts, what might we call that? And you could now type in what you call that. Okay. So, yeah. So thank you, Chris. Thank you, Amanda. Thank you, Penny, Mike, for typing in your answers. Now, if, I mean, you're probably doing this right now. You've probably muted the Irish yelling on blah, 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 blah in the background. And you're probably now going off to find out what the rest of the questions look like. But I'm also going to show you that within that document, and I hope some of you do try it in the next week or so, there's a zip file. And if you go to the zip file, you can download it and you will see the answers as well. I think somewhere I have the answers already open on my computer. I have a file. Let's try some answers. Okay, and my computer is now going slow. Maybe you might already have it open before me. Give me a moment. A bit of a pause. See, this is the pressure. When you're doing a live webinar, you've got lots of people watching. I have to open it up, put it on the screen. Come on, where are you? Open recent. Oh my gosh, no, I can't get it to open. So I probably should have just gone to the zip file instead. So I'll do that. So open the zip file on my computer. Here we are inside. And then we have the answers as well. So the answers are in the zip file. The questions are separate. It was paper one. Now, as I'm wrapping up the webinar, and you can see I'm going over just a little bit, and just shrink this down. What I want to show you and explain what I did with the year 11 class. So I was in a school with some students in year 11s I'd never met before, and I'm setting some exam papers. So what I did was we spent 10 minutes while they answered the exam, and we swapped the papers over. And then I said to the students, I want you to actually learn what it's like to be an examiner, because if you can learn what it's like to be an examiner, then a good chance that it's going to help you. So, of course, all those people who answered in the chat can see now that they got the correct answers. So abstraction, we were looking for, and decomposition. Now, don't get too big-headed, because I try to put the easy answers and the easy questions first. As you scroll down, you'll see that it gets a little bit more complicated. They had to design a bubble sort algorithm, and I'd also, to try and catch them out, I put a 1 mark question right below that one. And I was interested to see the students, how many of them spent ages trying to answer this section here without trying to answer the 1 mark easy question. Or they could have got 2 marks. No, they couldn't. They could only get 1 mark for that, but there's 2 possible answers. So I did that deliberately to try and catch some of them out. And I'd say half of the class straight away went and answered that question there. And half the class decided to tackle a really awkward, difficult question first. And then, of course, when I said, right, okay, everybody, I caught my hands. Okay, really stop. 10 minutes is up. Some of them are like, oh, I didn't get time to answer that one question there. So I wanted them to learn about um, the good strategy of reading ahead, figuring out which questions they can answer quickly, maybe draw a little smiley face, make some notes. But of course, the majority of this class were 15, 16-year-old boys. Well, then they're not going to do that, are they? They're just going to pick up their pen and start answering the questions straight away. Now, there we are. I've run over just by a few minutes, but you could see we were a few minutes late to start. In a minute or so, I'm going to stop the recording. So if anybody, if you can think of any questions that you would like to raise at this point, it might be useful for me to have those within the recording. What I'm going to do now is I'm just going to mention how you can find everything that we've done tonight. I'm going to go to the top of this document. There's a link where it says exa.foundation/events. Now, if you click on that, it takes you to a page that looks like this. And if you scroll down, you will see the 3rd of May, Teach Computing webinar, details, notes, and let me make my mouse pointer thing go big. That usually happens. If you click where it says notes, are you doing it on your screen? No, it's doing it on mine. Where the notes are, that will take you to that document. And I have no plans now really to add anything in other than I'll probably add a link to the recording so that you can watch it afterwards. So there we are. If no questions have come through the chat. Maybe it would be useful if you could please drop me an email, send me a message afterwards whether you found that of use, and I will send you when I get organized later on like a little evaluation questionnaire. You can say what worked really well for you, how it could have been better, and what you'd like to see. So if you go back and look at that document, you'll see for secondary school teachers, we've got another one on the 21st of May, similar timing, and you can already sign up now if you want. In fact, I can copy that now and put that link into our document somewhere here. So you've got a link now. You can click on there and you can sign up for the next one should you wish to do so. Oh, it doesn't have the date. 21st of May. All right, so thank you, everybody. I'm now going to go and stop the recording, and then I'll hang around for a minute or two.